As soon as she deposits the $73,000 for my trip, I'm sending that old woman to a nursing home. I heard that when my daughter-in-law left her cell phone on. I was in shock. I was actually going to lend her the money, but when I decided to freeze her cards, I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment what city you're watching from. That way I can see how far my story has reached.
At 63, I thought I had already experienced every possible form of pain. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my world collapsed. Chloe had come to visit like she always did on Tuesdays, bringing my grandkids to spend time with me. Everything seemed normal. She was playing with the kids in the living room while I prepared a snack in the kitchen, listening to their laughter mix with the little ones' voices. When I came back with the tray of homemade cookies, Chloe was on the phone near the couch. I didn't pay much attention at first. I was busy watching 7-year-old Tommy build a block tower, while 5-year-old Sarah colored in her favorite book. These moments were my most precious treasure. Chloe finished her call and left the phone on the coffee table. "Grandma Eleanor, I'm going to the restroom for a second," she told me with that smile that always melted my heart. For 8 years, ever since she married my son David, I had treated her like the daughter I never had. The kids kept playing when Chloe's phone rang. The screen showed the name Melissa, sister. Without overthinking it, I answered, figuring I could take a message. "Chloe, did you talk to the old woman about the money yet?" The voice was harsh, impatient. I froze. "The old woman is Melissa. This is Eleanor. Chloe is in the bathroom. Do you want me to tell her something?" A dead silence. Then the line went dead. But that wasn't what destroyed me. It was what I heard next. Chloe came back from the bathroom and grabbed her phone, not realizing it had stayed connected to another call. Her voice came through loud and clear from the speaker as she dialed her sister back. "Melissa, my stupid mother-in-law answered your call, but don't worry, she doesn't suspect a thing." My hands shook. The kids kept playing, completely unaware that their grandmother's world was crumbling to pieces. "Listen closely." Chloe continued walking toward the window. "As soon as that idiot old woman deposits the $73,000 for my trip, I'm putting her straight into a nursing home. I already researched everything. The cheapest place I found costs $3,100 a month. Her pension covers it perfectly." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. The air rushed out of my lungs. "But Chloe," I heard Melissa reply, "what if David objects?" Chloe's laugh was cruel, merciless. "David is a gullible idiot. I'm going to tell him his mom is losing her memory, that it's dangerous for her to live alone. I already planted some seeds. Yesterday I told him Eleanor had left the stove on and forgot to lock the front door. Obviously it's all a lie, but he swallowed it whole." My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. David actually believed that about me. "The plan is perfect," Chloe went on. "The old woman has always been too generous. She says the money is so David and I can take a family vacation to Europe. Ha! The fool doesn't even know I already booked the trip just for me and the kids. David is staying behind to work, as always." Melissa laughed. "You're terrible, sister. But you're right. That woman is way too dumb. Always giving and giving money." "Exactly. And once she's in the nursing home, I can sell this house. David will inherit everything when she dies. But in the meantime, I control the family finances. This property is easily worth $400,000. Tears were streaming down my cheeks, but I wiped them away quickly when Tommy walked over. "Grandma, are you okay?" he asked with that pure innocence only children have. "Yes, sweetie, I just got something in my eye." Chloe kept talking, having no idea I could hear every venomous word. "The best part is that the naive fool already has everything set up. She showed me the bank papers yesterday. The money will be available tomorrow afternoon. In a week, she'll be out of here, and I can finally live my life without that burden." Burden. That word buried itself in my chest like a dagger. For 8 years, I had watched her kids whenever she wanted a night out with friends. I had paid the medical bills when David hit a rough patch at work. I bought the school uniforms, the supplies. I even put down the down payment for the house they lived in. I remembered all those nights Chloe showed up at my door crying, telling me she didn't know how to raise kids, that she felt overwhelmed.
I comforted her, calmed her down, assured her she was a good mother. I even hired a weekend nanny out of my own pocket to give her a break. "And the kids?" Melissa asked. "The kids will be better off without her filling their heads with nonsense. She always buys them too much candy and lets them do whatever they want. She's a bad influence." Those words felt like physical slaps. Tommy and Sarah ran over to me right then, wrapping their little arms around my legs. "We love you, Grandma Eleanor," they said in unison. My heart seized. These kids, my grandchildren, had been my entire reason for living since my husband died 5 years ago. How could she take them away from me? "I have to hang up," Chloe said. "The old woman is going to get suspicious if I take too long." The call ended right as Chloe stepped back into the living room with that fake smile I was suddenly seeing through an entirely new lens. "Everything good out here?" she asked, kissing Sarah's forehead. "Everything is perfect," I managed to reply, though my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. For the rest of the visit, I watched her every gesture, every word. How had I never seen it before? The way she thumbed through my mail when she thought I wasn't looking. How she always steered conversations toward my finances. The seemingly innocent questions about my bank accounts. When they finally left, I sat alone on my couch, surrounded by the most agonizing silence of my life. In my hands, I held the bank card linked to the accounts Chloe had access to as a family helper. Accounts I had opened just to make grocery shopping and kid expenses easier for her. I couldn't sleep that night. Over and over, I replayed years of memories, spotting the glaring red flags I had willfully ignored. The way Chloe always had a sudden financial emergency right when I received a little extra money. How she never quite managed to pay back those loans. But I never demanded the money because we were family. My own son had been poisoned against me, manipulated into believing his mother's mind was slipping. How many other lies had she fed him? As dawn broke, I made a decision. If Chloe wanted to play a game, we were going to play. But this time, I would be the one writing the rules. The following days were the hardest of my life. I had to act like absolutely nothing had happened, while processing the most devastating betrayal I had ever experienced. Every time Chloe called or stopped by, her sweet voice and her little pecks on my cheek felt like pure venom. On Thursday morning, I decided to pull all my financial records. I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee that went ice cold as I uncovered the true, staggering magnitude of my blind generosity. The numbers did not lie. Over 8 years, I had handed Chloe and David more than $200,000. Not loaned, given. Because every time I loaned them cash, it never came back, and I never asked for it. There was $25,000 for their house down payment, $15,000 when David was laid off for a quarter, $30,000 for Chloe's new SUV because she needed something safe for the kids. Add $12,000 for last year's family vacation, plus thousands upon thousands in minor expenses, kids' clothes, medical bills, home repairs, even their living room furniture. I remembered every single instance. Chloe would show up with tears in her eyes, detailing the emergency of the week. "Eleanor, we just don't know what to do. David is under so much stress, and I'm terrified it's going to ruin our marriage." Always the same script. Always the exact same emotional blackmail. And like an absolute fool, I fell for it every single time. My phone rang. It was David. "Hey, Mom. How are you?" "I'm doing well, sweetie. Is everything okay with you?" "Yeah, but..." His voice carried a heavy edge of worry. "Mom, Chloe told me you forgot to turn off the stove again yesterday, and that you left the front door wide open all night." I felt a thick knot form in my throat. There it was, the manipulation playing out in real time. "David, I never did any of that. Mom, I know it's hard to admit, but maybe you should really consider moving somewhere you can get a little more help. There are some really beautiful assisted living facilities." The words came out of my mouth drier than I intended. "A nursing home?" "No, not a nursing home, Mom. A senior living community with on-site services. Chloe has been doing some research and found some great places. We just want what's best for you." Chloe had been researching. Of course she had. She had the whole board set up. "David, my memory is razor sharp.
I have never left a burner on or a door unlocked. An awkward silence stretched over the line. Mom, sometimes people just don't realize when they start slipping. Chloe is just worried about your safety. For the first time in years, a flash of genuine anger toward my own son flared in my chest. Not anger at his concern, but at his absolute blindness. How could he not see what the woman sleeping next to him was doing? David, did you happen to tell Chloe about the money for your trip? Yeah, she mentioned you guys talked about it. It's incredibly generous of you, Mom. Chloe is thrilled. She says it's going to be great for the whole family to finally take a real break. The whole family. Another blatant lie. Based on what I'd heard through that phone, David didn't even know his own ticket hadn't been booked. After hanging up, I just stared at my phone. My own flesh and blood was being played just as hard as I was, and he didn't see a damn thing. How long had Chloe been dripping this poison into his ear? That afternoon, my neighbor Margaret came over for tea, a weekly ritual we'd kept for a decade. Eleanor, you look like you've seen a ghost. Is everything all right? Margaret was 70, armed with the kind of grit and wisdom that comes from raising 5 kids and burying 2 husbands. If anyone could shoot straight with me, it was her. Margaret, have you ever noticed anything off about Chloe? Margaret set her teacup down on the saucer with a sharp clatter. Lord, Eleanor, I've been wondering when you were finally going to wake up. What do you mean, Maggie? That woman has been bleeding you dry since day one. Every woman on this block has seen it, but nobody knew how to broach the subject with you. My stomach dropped through the floor. All of you knew? Eleanor, she rolls up to your driveway in a different luxury car every few weeks. Last month, I saw her step out of a BMW I'd never seen before. The week before that, a Lexus. Where do you think the money for those cars is coming from? I hadn't even thought about that. Chloe always had a ready excuse. A friend's car, she borrowed a rental for a special occasion. And it's not just that, Margaret pressed on. I've seen her at the high-end mall downtown blowing obscene amounts of cash. Bags and bags from designer boutiques, clothes that cost more than my monthly mortgage. But she always tells me she's just a savvy bargain hunter. Margaret reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Eleanor, honey, that girl is parading around in designer outfits that cost thousands of dollars. There is no clearance rack on earth that explains that. Suddenly, a flood of disconnected memories snapped violently into focus. The shopping bags Chloe would quickly stash away when she walked into my house. The way she'd pivot the conversation anytime I complimented a new dress. The flashes of high-end jewelry I'd catch on her wrists that I had never noticed before. Why didn't anyone just tell me? Margaret let out a heavy sigh. We tried in our own subtle ways. Remember when Linda made that passing comment about Chloe having expensive taste? Or when Patricia flat out asked if David got a promotion because Chloe was looking so dolled up lately? She was right. Every single time someone floated a critique about Chloe, I threw myself on the grenade to protect her. I'd say she was a devoted mother. I'd insist she worked incredibly hard. We have all watched that woman play you like a fiddle, Margaret said. The way she always manufactures some crisis on your doorstep, how her voice goes up an octave when she needs a favor. We've even noticed how she snoops through your mail when she thinks nobody is looking. You've seen that? Honey, she opens your letters. I've watched her do it right from my living room window. I even caught her snapping pictures of your financial statements with her phone once. The betrayal carved itself a little deeper into my ribs. She wasn't just emotionally extorting me. She had been running active surveillance on my bank accounts for years. And David? Does he have any idea? Margaret slowly shook her head. David is a good man, but he is flying completely blind. That woman has him on a tight leash. We haven't seen that boy genuinely smile in months. That night, sitting alone in the dark, I scrolled through years of family photos. Christmas mornings, birthdays, graduations. In every single frame, Chloe was impeccably styled, in outfits I now knew cost more than David's monthly paycheck. And I, like an absolute idiot, just thought she was a wizard at finding discount codes. I remembered the time she showed up on my porch, sobbing, because things were so tight they couldn't afford Christmas dinner. I wrote her a check for $500 on the spot. That exact same week, Margaret had mentioned seeing Chloe at a 5-star steakhouse downtown.
with her girlfriends ordering top-shelf drinks without batting an eye. Every disjointed puzzle piece finally locked together. The tearful emergency loans that magically coincided with her flashy new purchases. The manufactured family crises that required my immediate financial rescue. The uncanny way she always seemed to know exactly how much liquid cash I had sitting in my accounts. On Friday morning, my phone buzzed. It was Chloe. "Hey, Eleanor, do you have the trip money ready to go? I really need to lock in these final reservations." "Yes, sweetheart," I said smoothly. "I'll have it all squared away by tomorrow." "Perfect. You know how much this means to our family. David has been under so much pressure lately." After I hung up, I looked down at the bank documents scattered across my dining table. The $73,000 was primed for transfer. But for the first time in 8 years, I wasn't stepping into the trap. I woke up Saturday morning with a cold, hard determination I hadn't felt in decades. If Chloe had been out there touring nursing homes for me, it was high time I did a little digging into her life. I started with the lowest hanging fruit, social media. I was never a heavy Facebook or Instagram user, but I knew my way around. What I found knocked the wind right out of me. Chloe's profile was a glossy catalog of unapologetic luxury. Photos plated at exclusive restaurants that I knew charged more for a steak than my monthly grocery budget. Endless reels of spa days, high-end facials, fresh manicures every week. But the real gut punch was the shopping hauls. Louis Vuitton bags, red-bottom Louboutin heels, Chanel dresses. In one post, she was showing off a necklace I instantly recognized. I had seen it in a jewelry store window downtown. It retailed for $3,000. I kept scrolling, matching the timestamps of her posts to my memory. Every single heartbreaking financial crisis she had pitched on my couch corresponded perfectly with a brand new luxury flex on her feed. The afternoon she begged me for money to cover little Sarah's specialty medication, she posted a photo of a $500 per head tasting menu that same night. But the most damning evidence was tucked away in the comments section from her friends. "Shopping spree again? Your mother-in-law must be loaded. You hit the jackpot with Eleanor. Mine won't even buy me a coffee. When are you going to introduce me to your golden goose?" Every comment was a razor blade. Her entire social circle knew I was funding this lifestyle. They were all laughing at my blind generosity behind my back. Then I found something infinitely worse. A video posted 3 months ago. Chloe was at what looked like a rooftop party, clearly 3 drinks deep, laughing directly into the camera. "My mother-in-law is so gullible, she buys every word out of my mouth. I told her we needed $5,000 to fix a leak in the roof, and it was total bullshit. I just wanted to do a girls' trip to Miami." You could hear her friends cackling in the background. One of them yelled, "You are awful, but damn, that's genius." I had to physically stand up and pace the living room just to process the sheer audacity of what I was watching. She wasn't just lying to my face. She was broadcasting her theft to the world as a punchline. I decided to dig deeper. I called my bank and requested a comprehensive line-by-line audit of every account Chloe had access to. The resulting paperwork was devastating. Chloe had been skimming unauthorized withdrawals for months. Small, easily overlooked amounts, $50 here, $100 there. But aggressively compounded it bled into thousands of dollars a month. She had literally been swiping my debit card at high-end boutiques, day spas, and cocktail lounges. She was even using my checking account to quietly pay down her own personal credit card balances. But the most twisted knife was discovering the truth about the kids' expenses. Those $200 private school uniforms I paid for were funneled into designer clothes for herself. Tommy's elite swimming lessons were premium beauty treatments. Sarah's essential allergy medications were luxury skincare hauls that cost $500 a pop. I picked up the phone and called the kids' private school, playing the confused grandmother, trying to verify some billing details. "Mrs. Holloway?" the school secretary said gently. "The children are on a full academic scholarship. We have never collected tuition from your family." A full scholarship. I had been writing checks for their private tuition for 2 straight years, well over $2,000 a month. "And what about their extracurricular programs?" I asked, my voice trembling. The children aren't enrolled in any paid extracurriculars, ma'am. They are just in the standard academic track. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Every single dime I thought I was investing in my grandchildren's future had gone straight into Chloe's designer pockets. That afternoon, Margaret came knocking. I laid everything out on the table for her. "Eleanor, there's something else you need to know," she said, her expression turning dead serious. "Yesterday I saw Chloe walking out of a law office downtown. She was carrying a thick folder and looked extremely pleased with herself." "A law office?" "Yeah, Henderson and Associates. They specialize in estate planning and real estate." My blood ran ice cold. Was she actively trying to alter my will behind my back? "Margaret, do you know anyone who works inside that building? My niece Linda is a paralegal there. I can have her poke around quietly and see what she can find out." The very next day, Margaret was back at my kitchen table with intel that made me physically nauseous. "Eleanor, according to Linda, Chloe came in for a consultation regarding a daughter-in-law's legal rights when a parent is declared mentally incompetent." "What?" She specifically asked what it takes to secure power of attorney over an elderly relative who is supposedly losing their cognitive function. She also requested the exact legal protocol for having someone committed to an assisted living facility against their will. The blueprint was far more sinister than a simple money grab. She didn't just want to lock me away in a home, she wanted absolute, unchecked dominion over my entire estate before she did it. "There's more," Margaret continued grimly. She also inquired about legal loopholes to accelerate an inheritance payout in cases where the beneficiary is claiming extreme financial hardship. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Chloe didn't just view me as an ATM. She was actively drafting the legal paperwork to erase my autonomy and hijack my life's work. Come Monday morning, I scheduled my own visit with a lawyer. Not the one Chloe had scouted, but James Morrison, the attorney who had ironclad my husband's estate years ago. He was a sharp, no-nonsense guy who knew my financial architecture inside and out. "Eleanor, it's good to see you. Though you look like you're carrying the weight of the world. What's going on?" I laid it all out. Every forged receipt, every exposed lie, every piece of the trap Chloe was currently building. James listened in absolute silence, only occasionally jotting a note on his legal pad. "Eleanor, this is incredibly severe. What you are describing is textbook elder financial abuse. That is a federal crime." "But what are my options? She's married to my son." "First, we lock down your assets immediately. Second, you document every single discrepancy you've found. And third," James looked me dead in the eye, "you need to decide exactly how much collateral damage you're willing to inflict to protect yourself." "What do you mean by that?" "I mean you can press criminal charges. You can sue her in civil court for restitution. Or you can handle this much more strategically." For the next 2 hours, James walked me through the tactical playbook. I could instantly sever all of Chloe's financial lifelines. I could rewrite my will from scratch. I could even slap her with a restraining order. "But James, what happens to David? What happens to my grandchildren?" "Eleanor, your son is caught in the same web you are. Sometimes the only way to save a man drowning in a lie is to drag him into the harsh truth, no matter how much it hurts." I drove home that afternoon, clutching a heavy folder of legal documents and a razor-sharp strategy. Chloe wanted to play the mastermind, but she had grossly miscalculated the woman she was sitting across from. I called my bank and scheduled an in-person appointment for the moment they opened. It was time to sever the supply lines. When Chloe called that evening to double-check that her travel funds were secured, I kept my voice light and assured her everything was perfectly in order. "Excellent, Eleanor. I'll swing by tomorrow afternoon to pick up the cashier's check." "Of course, dear. It will be waiting for you." What she didn't know was that the woman she'd be meeting tomorrow no longer existed. The naive, easily manipulated mother-in-law was dead. In her place was a woman who had finally seen the board clearly and was ready to make her move. Tuesday morning, I walked through the glass doors of my bank at 9 o'clock sharp. I had spent the entire night mentally rehearsing the choreography of what needed to happen next. There was zero margin for error. "Mrs. Holloway?" The branch manager greeted me warmly. "How can we help you today?" "I need to make some immediate structural changes to my accounts.
Over the next 45 minutes, I surgically executed every single maneuver James Morrison had laid out. First, I scrubbed Chloe's name as an authorized user from every piece of plastic tied to my name. Second, I nuked every password, PIN, and security protocol, replacing them all. Third, I ordered entirely new cards with fresh account numbers. Would you also like to pause the automated recurring transfers you have set up? The banker asked. Looking at that printout felt like taking a bullet to the ribs. Monthly wire transfers I had absolutely no memory of authorizing. $1,000 funneled straight to Chloe's personal checking. 300 marked for kids' school expenses. 200 labeled for a family emergency fund. Cancel every single automated transfer, I said without a tremor in my voice. And that $73,000 cashier's check I had drafted, void it immediately. The banker blinked, clearly sensing the gravity of the shift, but he pushed the buttons without a word. Before I walked out, I executed the kill shot. I opened a brand new account at a completely different banking institution across town and wired the lion's share of my life savings into it. If Chloe had a mole inside this branch feeding her intel, I was making damn sure my vault was completely out of reach. By 11, I was back in my kitchen, feeling a profound sense of control I hadn't tasted in years. But the real trial was still ticking on the clock. At 2 in the afternoon, right on schedule, tires crunched in my driveway. Chloe walked up to the porch alone. No kids in tow. That told me everything I needed to know. This was a pure business transaction for her. "Eleanor, how are you?" she chimed, flashing that perfectly curated hollow smile. "I'm doing wonderfully, sweetheart. Come on in, take a seat." We settled into the living room. Chloe seemed jittery, her eyes darting to her phone screen every few seconds. "So, do you have the check ready? I really need to get it to the teller before the afternoon cutoff so the funds clear by tomorrow." "Of course I do. But before I hand it over, there's something we need to discuss." Her plastic smile tightened at the corners. "Oh, what about?" "I've been doing a deep dive into my finances lately, and it really hit me just how incredibly generous I've been with you two over the years." "Oh, Eleanor, you know David and I appreciate it so much. You are literally the best mother-in-law on earth." $200,000 in 8 years. I stated, my voice smooth as glass. Chloe blinked, her posture stiffening. "Excuse me?" "I have handed your household over $200,000 in the last 8 years, and that's not even tallying up the incidentals." "Well, we have always been so incredibly grateful for your help, Eleanor. And yet, I haven't seen a single red cent of those loans paid back." The warm flush of makeup seemed to drain right out of her cheeks. "Eleanor, you know we've hit some rough patches. David just doesn't bring in the kind of money." I cut her off, my tone dropping an octave. I called the kids' academy. A suffocating dead silence flooded the living room. "The children are on a full academic ride, Chloe. You haven't paid a dime in tuition." Chloe's mouth parted, but her vocal cords completely failed her. "I also had a very enlightening chat with my bank manager. Those $1,000 automated transfers you quietly set up without my signature, I can completely explain that, Eleanor. And I took a little tour through your social media pages. Very impressive hauls. You have exquisite taste in handbags." Chloe shot up from the sofa like a coiled spring. "I don't know what the hell you are insinuating right now." "I am not insinuating a damn thing, Chloe. I am stating as a matter of absolute fact that you have been robbing me blind for nearly a decade." The mask finally cracked. The sweet, overwhelmed young mother evaporated into thin air, and the woman standing in my living room was a cold, calculating stranger. "Robbing you," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "Everything I did was to help manage your messy finances. You are an old woman, Eleanor. You make mistakes. You leave burners on. You leave doors wide open." "I never did any of that, and you know it." "Oh, really? Because David is thoroughly convinced his mother's mind is rotting away." For the first time, a flicker of genuine panic flashed in her eyes when I didn't flinch. "I also know all about your little consultation over at Henderson and Associates.
Fascinating reading up on how to secure power of attorney over a mentally incompetent relative, isn't it?
Chloe physically took a step back as if I had struck her across the jaw.
You are completely out of your mind. And asking a lawyer how to forcefully commit a senior citizen to an assisted living facility against their will? That takes real ambition. This is insane. I would never do something like that. I leaned forward, locking my eyes onto hers. As soon as that idiot old woman deposits the $73,000 for my trip, I'm putting her straight into a nursing home. Those were your exact words, weren't they?
Chloe went white as a sheet.
How? Your phone didn't disconnect when you called Melissa. I sat right here and listened to every single syllable. Chloe's legs gave out. She collapsed back onto the sofa, the last shreds of her performance burning away into ash.
For several agonizing minutes, neither of us made a sound.
The only noise was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Finally, Chloe slowly raised her head. The panic in her eyes had been replaced by something infinitely more dangerous. Pure, unadulterated rage. "So what are you going to do?" she sneered. "Run and tell David? He is never going to believe a word that comes out of your mouth. I have spent months laying the groundwork that you are losing your damn mind."
I planted the seeds. He is already convinced you need specialized psychiatric care. One phone call from me and you'll be locked in a ward, with or without your consent. I stood up, slowly walked over to my oak desk, and pulled out the thick manila folder James had prepared. I tossed it onto the coffee table between us.
"That's a very interesting theory, Chloe. But inside that folder are the bank audits proving your unauthorized wire fraud, time-stamped screenshots of your luxury purchases funded by my stolen money, and a signed affidavit from a witness who watched you walk out of that law firm." The arrogant smirk melted off her face, replaced by absolute,
Suffocating panic.
"And I also have this." I pulled out my cell phone, tapped the screen, and hit play. Her voice echoed through the living room, crisp and undeniable. "As soon as that idiot old woman deposits the $73,000 for my trip, I'm putting her straight into a nursing home." "You recorded my private conversation," she hissed. "It ceased being a private conversation the second you broadcast it into my living room." Chloe shot to her feet, her hands physically shaking with rage. "Give me that goddamn cashier's check right now." "What check?" I smiled thinly. "Oh, you mean the $73,000. I'm afraid that draft has been permanently voided." "What did you do?" "This morning, I legally severed your access to every single account bearing my name. I also nuked your little automated slush funds." Chloe looked at me like a cornered animal, ready to tear my throat out. "You cannot do this to me. Watch me. It is my money. David is going to hear about this." "I certainly hope so. Be my guest. He is going to cut you out of our lives forever." I crossed my arms. "Chloe, do you genuinely believe David is going to take your side when I lay a mountain of federal wire fraud evidence on his lap?" For the first time, a dark shadow of doubt flickered across her features. "Because I fully intend to show him every single receipt. The designer bags bought with my retirement funds while you cried to him about being broke. The forged withdrawals. The calculated lies about my dementia. The legal blueprints to lock me in a cage." Chloe snatched her designer purse off the couch and stormed toward the front door. "This isn't over, Eleanor. You're right about that. It's just getting started." She turned back her hand on the brass knob. "You are going to regret this for the rest of your miserable life. The only thing I regret is taking 8 years to see the snake in my grass." After she slammed the door behind her, I sank back into the sofa, a chaotic cocktail of adrenaline and dread washing over me. I had laid all my cards on the table. Chloe knew exactly the caliber of the weapon pointed at her head. It was only a matter of time before she launched her counteroffensive, but this time I was dug into the trenches. My phone started vibrating on the coffee table. It was David. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" Chloe just burst through the door crying hysterically. I took a deep, steadying breath. "Son, I think you need to come over here. We need to have a very long talk." David pulled into my driveway an hour later, and for the first time in recent memory,
He walked through my front door completely alone. His face was a bruised canvas of confusion, anger, and deep-seated worry. It broke my heart. He was my boy, and despite everything, I loved him fiercely. Mom, Chloe says you cornered her, accused her of embezzling money, screamed at her and threatened her. What the hell is happening? Looking at him in the harsh afternoon light, I saw just how exhausted he really was. He had dark, heavy bags under his eyes. He had lost weight since the last time I saw him, outside of Chloe's domineering presence. Sit down, David. We have a lot of ground to cover. Mom, before you say anything, you need to understand that Chloe is terrified for you. She thinks you are developing severe paranoia. She thinks you're losing your grip on reality, that you're inventing scenarios that never happened. I slid the thick legal folder across the coffee table. David, before you spend another second defending your wife, I need you to open that file. For the next 30 minutes, the only sound in the room was the rustling of paper. We went through every document, every bank ledger, every damning piece of evidence. I watched my son's face morph from defensive skepticism to stunned shock, and finally into a hollow, devastating horror. This can't be real, he muttered, tracing his fingers over the glossy printouts of Chloe's social media feed. These bags, this jewelry. Mom, I have never seen these things in our house. Because she hides them from you, David. The exact same way she hides the bank statements. I walked him through the forensic accounting, highlighting every unauthorized withdrawal. Look at the timestamps. Every single time she came crying to me for an emergency loan to save your marriage, she was swiping my debit card at a luxury boutique 48 hours later. David sat in complete silence for a long time, flipping through the pages over and over, as if praying the ink would magically rearrange itself. The kids' tuition, he finally whispered, his voice cracking. She always told me you were handling it because you wanted to invest in their future. The kids are on a full academic scholarship, David. I called the headmaster myself this morning to verify it. You could physically see the reality of the betrayal snap his spine. I picked up my phone and hit play on the audio file. David listened in dead, breathless silence as his wife's voice filled the room, his skin turning the color of ash. That idiot old woman, he repeated softly when the recording clicked off. That is exactly how she talks about me behind closed doors, I said. And she talks about you too, son. On that same call, she called you a gullible idiot who would swallow any lie she fed you. David shot up from the couch and paced aggressively toward the window, dragging his hands down his face. Jesus Christ, Mom, how long has this been going on? 8 years, David, since the day you put a ring on her finger. And you never told me? Why the hell didn't you ever say anything to me? That question cut deeper than any insult Chloe had ever hurled my way. Because you are my son, and I just wanted you to be happy. I kept thinking that if I just loved her enough, if I supported her enough, she would eventually learn to genuinely love this family. David turned back to face me, and the tears were finally spilling over his lashes. Mom, I swear to God, I didn't know about any of this. You have to believe me. I know you didn't, sweetheart. I believe you. She always told me we were just scraping by, that you helped us out with the groceries because you wanted to pitch in. She never showed me any specific numbers. He dropped heavily back onto the sofa. And the stuff about your memory slipping, that started a few months ago. Just little things at first. She'd say you told the same story 3 times at dinner, that you were forgetting entire conversations. Then it escalated to the stove and the front door. David, I have never once forgotten to turn off my stove. I know that now. God, how could I be so unbelievably blind? Right on cue, my cell phone lit up on the table. It was Chloe. Do not answer that, David said sharply. But I picked it up and tapped the speakerphone button. Eleanor, have you finished spinning your paranoid delusions to my husband yet? Chloe's voice was pure venom, completely stripped of the saccharine sweetness she had always used with me. David went rigid in his chair, his jaw clenching so hard I thought it might shatter. Chloe, I said evenly, David is sitting right here in my living room. You are on speakerphone. A sharp, jagged silence hummed over the line. When Chloe spoke again, the pivot in her tone was enough to give you whiplash. David, oh, thank God you're there, baby. Your mother just cornered me and accused me of the most horrific things. I'm telling you, her mind is completely going. Chloe, David interrupted. His voice was something I hadn't heard in a decade, ice-cold, authoritative, and utterly devoid of warmth. I just spent the last hour reading through the entire dossier. Another silence. What dossier, David? I don't know what your mother is rambling about. The bank audits, the social media archives, the timestamp receipts, the audio recording of you talking to Melissa. The silence that followed was deafening. David, baby, I can completely explain everything. Can you explain why there's photographic evidence of you wearing $10,000 worth of designer clothing on the exact same day you cried to me that we couldn't afford to replace the brakes on my car? Those were just gifts from friends, David. Can you explain why you forged thousands of dollars in unauthorized withdrawals from my mother's retirement accounts? David, you know her mind is slipping. She literally told me I could use that money for the house. Can you explain why you were mapping out the legal strategy to lock her in a psychiatric ward against her will while calling her an idiot behind her back? This time, Chloe didn't fire back with a quick excuse. When she finally spoke, the desperate wife routine was dead and buried. David, if you want to side with your paranoid, delusional mother over the woman you sleep next to, that is your funeral. But you better think very carefully about what you are doing right now. You better think about your children. That is exactly who I am thinking about. David fired back without missing a beat. I'm thinking about exactly what kind of monster is raising them. Are you threatening me, David? I'm not threatening you, Chloe. I am telling you that when I walk through that front door, we are going to have a profoundly serious conversation about the immediate termination of our marriage. David, wait! He reached across the table and ended the call. David buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with the weight of the wreckage. How do you sleep next to someone for 8 years and not know who the hell they are? Because she is a master manipulator, David, and because you are a fundamentally decent man who assumes the best in people. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot. Mom, about the things she said about the assisted living facilities. David, you do not need to carry the guilt for her sins. Yes, I do, because I bought it. I actually believed you were losing your cognitive function. I even started looking at brochures for specialized care facilities. Hearing that stung, but I understood the mechanics of the trap he'd been caught in. She is a very convincing actress, son. So what the hell do I do now? He looked as lost as he did when he was a little boy. You are going to hire a ruthless attorney. You are going to protect your children. And from this second forward, you make every decision based on hard facts, not her fiction. David stayed at my house late into the night. We talked through things we hadn't touched on in years. He confessed the suffocating pressure he felt daily, how Chloe always manufactured some catastrophic crisis that demanded his total attention, how he had systematically lost touch with all his friends because she always found a reason to sabotage his plans. I didn't even realize how completely isolated I was, he admitted quietly. I haven't had a real conversation with anyone outside of you, her, and my coworkers in months. That is page 1 of the Manipulator's Handbook, I explained. They slowly cut off your oxygen supply until they are the only reality you have left. When David finally pulled out of my driveway, we both knew the real war was just cresting the horizon. 2 hours later, my phone lit up with a barrage of texts from Chloe. This is all your fault, you old witch. You destroyed my marriage. I will never forgive you for this. David is filing for divorce because of you. That last text actually made me smile. My son had finally found his spine. But the next message wiped the smile clean off my face. If you think this ends here, you are dead wrong. I am going to take those grandkids you love so much, and you will never see them again. The opening shots had been fired. But for the first time in 8 long years, I wasn't fighting in the dark alone. 6 months later, I was sitting on the back patio of my new house, sipping iced tea and watching Tommy and Sarah chase each other through the fruit trees I had planted specifically for them. David had bought the property right next door, tearing down the fence, so the kids could run freely between our houses every single day without the suffocating restrictions Chloe used to enforce. The divorce proceedings had been brutally swift. When David's legal team dropped the nuclear payload of financial fraud evidence onto the boardroom table, Chloe was stripped of all her leverage. Her own counsel advised her to take a meager settlement and run, warning her that if they went to trial, the paper trail would slaughter her in open court. What Chloe hadn't factored into her grand calculus was that her entire high society lifestyle was entirely subsidized by my stolen cash. The second I clamped the artery shut, her illusion of luxury collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. James Morrison had assured me we had a slam-dunk criminal case for federal wire fraud, but David begged me not to press charges, purely to spare the children the trauma of watching their mother handcuffed. I agreed, but I attached one non-negotiable condition to my mercy. Chloe had to liquidate everything and pay back every single stolen dime. The forensic accounting during discovery revealed the rot was infinitely deeper than my initial audit. Over 8 years, Chloe had siphoned over $300,000 through unauthorized withdrawals, fraudulent charges, and ghost transfers. Extracting that blood money proved to be its own form of poetic justice. Chloe was legally forced to auction off the entirety of her curated luxury life. The designer handbags, the diamond tennis bracelets, the couture wardrobe. It all went to the highest bidder to satisfy the debt. She even had to surrender the keys to her luxury SUV and sign a lease on a cramped apartment in a decidedly less glamorous zip code. But the most delicious irony was delivered by the universe itself. A couple of weeks after the ink dried on the divorce papers, Margaret strolled across my lawn with a pitcher of lemonade and some spectacular neighborhood gossip. "Eleanor, do you remember Melissa, Chloe's sister, from that phone call?" "Vividly." Well, it turns out, Chloe had borrowed $5,000 from Melissa a few months back, swearing she was going to pay her back with the cash she was squeezing out of you for that European vacation. Melissa wants her money, and Chloe is completely tapped out. It turned out I wasn't her only mark. Chloe had been running a decentralized Ponzi scheme on her own sister and several of her high society friends. When her primary financial host cut the cord, her entire fraudulent ecosystem imploded overnight. "Oh, it gets better," Margaret purred, a wicked gleam in her eye. "Linda down at the law firm told me Chloe actually had the nerve to petition the court for massive alimony payments, claiming she had grown accustomed to a certain standard of living during the marriage." And how did that play out? The judge took one look at the forensic audit, noted that her standard of living was entirely financed by money stolen from her elderly mother-in-law, and practically laughed her out of the courtroom. The symmetry of it was absolute perfection. Chloe had spent a decade meticulously constructing an avatar of wealth and sophistication, but the entire foundation was built on my stolen checks. When the floodlights hit the cockroaches, she didn't just lose access to my vault. Her entire fabricated reality evaporated. David was a fundamentally transformed man in the aftermath. The hollow, perpetually anxious ghost who had been slowly suffocating under Chloe's psychological warfare was gone, replaced by a grounded, confident father. "Mom," he said to me one evening as we watched the sun dip below the tree line, "I want to formally apologize, not just for being blind to the theft, but for doubting your sanity. David, we've buried this. You don't need to apologize." "No, let me finish. I spent years thinking you were just a hypercritical, overbearing mother-in-law, trying to micromanage my marriage. I finally realized that every time you pushed back, you were just trying to throw me a life preserver." It was true. For years, I had dropped subtle warnings about Chloe's reckless spending, her manufactured crises, the chilling way her entire personality shifted the moment she thought nobody was watching. David had always interpreted my red flags as hostile interference. "The only thing that matters now is that we are standing in the truth," I told him, "and that the kids are safe," he added. That had been the terrifying wild card. Throughout the divorce, Chloe had wielded the children like a loaded gun, threatening to drag them across state lines just to twist the knife in my gut. But when the family court judge reviewed the mountain of documented fraud, extortion, and psychological manipulation, he swiftly awarded David primary physical custody. Chloe was granted supervised weekend visitations, but even those quickly devolved into a nightmare. She immediately weaponized the limited time she had, trying to poison the kids against us. Tommy, armed with the brutal, unfiltered honesty of a 7-year-old, came home one Sunday and said, "Grandma, Mommy Chloe says really mean things about you in the car. She says you're a bad lady and you stole all her money." It was David who dropped the absolute hammer, filing an emergency injunction that mandated a court-appointed social worker be present for all future visits to ensure Chloe couldn't inflict any more psychological shrapnel on his children. 3 months after the dust had completely settled, I received a phone call from an unknown number. "Eleanor, it's Melissa, Chloe's sister." I held the phone to my ear, waiting in absolute silence. "Listen, I know you probably want absolutely nothing to do with me, but I need to clear my conscience. When I heard you on the line that day, I should have hung up the phone. I should have told my sister that what she was doing to you was sick." "Why didn't you?" I asked quietly. I heard a ragged sigh echo through the receiver. "Because Chloe has been doing this her entire life. Ever since we were little girls, she lied, she manipulated, she stole things that didn't belong to her. Our parents constantly covered for her, claiming she was just highly ambitious and driven. I just got used to looking the other way. But now she owes me $5,000 she can't pay. And I finally see the pathology for what it is. You know, you aren't the first elderly relative she's bled dry." Right. She ran the exact same playbook on our own grandmother right before she passed away. That revelation hit me like a physical blow. Chloe had been refining this predatory grift for years. She squeezed over $50,000 out of my Nana in her final years, swearing she was using the cash to pay for experimental medical treatments for the kids. Total bullshit. The kids were perfectly healthy. After I hung up, a chilling clarity washed over me. My nightmare hadn't been a random stroke of bad luck. Chloe was a systematic apex predator who specifically targeted the blind generosity of elderly family members. But I also realized something deeply empowering. I had accomplished what her previous victims couldn't. I broke the wheel. I didn't just fortify my own bank accounts, I shielded my grandchildren from a mother who would inevitably view them as nothing more than pawns to be leveraged as they grew older. A year after the initial fallout, our lives had settled into a beautiful, unshakable rhythm. The kids ran over to my kitchen for an after-school snack every single day. David had resurrected his old friendships and had even tentatively started dating a wonderful woman named Lisa, a second-grade teacher who engaged with Tommy and Sarah with genuine, effortless warmth. Chloe had practically vanished from the map. She was fired from her corporate job when HR discovered she had been using company time and resources to manage her sprawling web of personal financial fraud. Destitute and unable to make rent, she had quietly slunk back across state lines to move into her parents' basement. Her visitations became so sporadic and flaky that Tommy eventually stopped asking why his other mom didn't come around as much. Because sometimes, adults make choices that push them away from the people who love them, David had explained to him one night, his voice laced with a hard-earned wisdom. On a quiet Sunday afternoon while I was showing Sarah how to fold cookie dough and teaching Tommy how to stake tomato plants in the garden, I took a moment to reflect on the absolute firestorm we had survived. For years, I had operated under the delusion that being a good mother-in-law meant writing blank checks, absorbing disrespect without complaint, and offering unconditional forgiveness. I had fatally confused genuine love with toxic complicity. I mistook my own cowardice for generosity. Chloe had forced me to learn the most brutal, valuable lesson of my life. Sometimes the most profound act of kindness you can offer someone is denying them the opportunity to keep victimizing you. Setting a reinforced steel boundary isn't an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate act of wisdom. My grandchildren were finally thriving in an ecosystem completely free of their mother's radioactive manipulation. David had reclaimed his manhood, his autonomy, and his joy, and I had finally learned that my worth as a matriarch was never measured by the commas in my bank account, but by the fierce protective love I was willing to enforce.
That night, as the kids settled into the guest room for their weekly Friday sleepover, I listened to their muffled giggles echoing down the hallway as they plotted out tomorrow's adventures. There was no lingering thirst for vengeance in my chest, no corrosive bitterness eating at my soul. There was only the bone-deep, quiet satisfaction of knowing I had stood my ground and protected the only thing in this world that actually mattered: the authentic, unpurchasable love of my family. Chloe had lost infinitely more than a free ride. She had forfeited her only chance to be part of something real, something that all the stolen money in the world could never buy. And for the first time in 8 long years, I turned off the bedside lamp, closed my eyes, and slept in absolute unbroken peace.